Welcome to the BritishBattles.com podcast on the Battle of Ladysmith, the first defeat of the British in the Boer War, also known as Lombard's Kop and Nicholson's Neck, and fought on 29th October 1899 in the Boer War, leading to the Siege of Ladysmith. My name is John Mackenzie. I am the editor of BritishBattles.com. I write the text for the entries in BritishBattles.com. I also select the illustrations and draft the maps under my nom de carte of John Fawkes. I would invite you to look at the BritishBattles.com site for the Battle of Ladysmith, where you will see a number of illustrations and my map of the battle. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and I invite you to send me your comments to info@BritishBattles.com. The Battle of Ladysmith was fought on 29th October 1899 in northern Natal in southern Africa, between a force of 12,000 British troops commanded by Lieutenant General Sir George White and a force of 30,000 Boers commanded by General Joubert, with General Erasmus as his immediate subordinate. Other Boer leaders present at the battle were Louis Botha, in command of the Johannesburg Commando, and Christian de Wet. The Boer War was a serious jolt for the British Army. At the outbreak of the war, British tactics were appropriate for the use of single-shot firearms, fired in volleys controlled by company and battalion officers, the troops fighting in close order. These tactics had to be entirely rethought in battle against the Boers, armed with modern weapons. In the months before hostilities, the Boer Commandant General, General Joubert, bought 30,000 Mauser magazine rifles, firing smokeless ammunition. He also bought modern field guns and automatic weapons from Krupp, Creusot and Maxim. In error, Joubert bought high-explosive ammunition for the field guns, the appropriate ammunition for use in open battle being shrapnel. Most Boers were countrymen, running their farms from the back of a pony with a rifle in one hand. These rural Boers brought a lifetime of marksmanship to the war, an important advantage further enhanced by Joubert's consignment of smokeless magazine rifles. The Boer commandos, without formal discipline, welded into a fighting force through a strong sense of community. Field cornets led burghers by personal influence, not through any military code. The Boer commander, Viljoen, is said to have coined the aphorism, "We will win through God and the Mauser." Other than in the regular uniformed Staats artillery and police units, the Boers wore everyday civilian clothes on campaign. The British infantry were armed with the Lee Metford magazine rifle, firing 10 rounds. But no training regime had been established to take advantage of the accuracy and speed of fire of the weapon. Personal skills such as scouting and fieldcraft were little taught. The idea of individual firing from cover was largely unknown, many regiments still going into action in close order. Some of the most successful British troops were the non-regular regiments, the Imperial Light Horse, the City Imperial Volunteers, the South Africans, Canadians, Australians and New Zealanders, who more easily broke from the habit of earlier British colonial warfare, using their horses for transport rather than the charge, advancing by fire and manoeuvre in loose formations and making use of cover rather than the formal advance into a storm of Mauser bullets. The British artillery was a powerful force in the field, but was underused by commanders with little training in the use of modern guns in battle. The Royal Field Artillery fought with 15-pounder guns, the Royal Horse Artillery with 12-pounders, and the Royal Garrison Artillery batteries with 5-inch howitzers and mountain guns. The Royal Navy provided heavy field artillery with a number of naval guns mounted on field carriages, devised by Captain Percy Scott of HMS Terrible. Automatic weapons were used by both sides. A list of the British regiments that took part in the Battle of Ladysmith is given on the BritishBattles.com website. The British won 2 victories at the beginning of the campaign: Talana Hill, or Dundee, on 20th October and Elandslaagte on 21st October 1899. Each battle was against small contingents of Boers moving in advance of the main Boer armies of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Command of the Dundee force passed with the fatal wounding of General Penn Simmons to Brigadier General Ewell, the ex-commanding officer of the 1st Devonshires. Ewell remained in the Dundee camp while the Boers moved down the main north-south road from Newcastle and gathered on the neighbouring hills overlooking Dundee. The Boer commander, Erasmus, positioned a Creusot siege gun on Impati Hill to the northwest of Dundee and began a bombardment of the British camp and the town, indiscriminately putting shells into the military hospital, where General Penn Simmons and the British and Boer casualties from the Talana Hill battle lay. Ewell, an older regimental officer propelled into the command by the wounding of Penn Simmons, was not a dynamic commander. He attempted to improve his position, but his force was of insufficient strength to carry out any meaningful offensive operation. Ewell's position deteriorated further when Lieutenant General Sir George White, acting on erroneous reports that Ladysmith was threatened by a large force of Orange Free State Boers from the west, and that General Joubert was advancing on Elandslaagte with the main force of Transvaal Boers, ordered General French's force that had just won the Battle of Elandslaagte to withdraw to Ladysmith. So precipitate was this retreat that large quantities of supplies with captured Boer weapons and prisoners were left behind. In addition to damaging the morale of the British soldiers involved, the road from Dundee to Ladysmith was lost to Ewell. The route for communicating between Dundee and Ladysmith was now a track over the Biggarsberg Hills. Ewell inquired what he was to do. White dithered and finally told Ewell to fall back to Ladysmith. On the night of Sunday 22nd October 1899, Ewell's force marched out of Dundee, heading south. The British camp was left standing, and the wounded remained in the hospitals with some of the medical staff. The residents of Dundee were left in ignorance of the British retreat. Ewell's men covered 10 miles before halting for the remainder of the night. In the morning, the Boers discovered that the British had left Dundee and ransacked the British camp and the town. General Penn Simmons, on the verge of death, was distraught to find that he had been abandoned to the Boers with the rest of the British wounded. Fortunately for the British, the Boers conducted no determined pursuit of Ewell's brigade. On the second day of Ewell's march, White sent a force of 3 batteries of guns, 4 battalions of infantry, and 5 cavalry and mounted regiments to carry out a diversionary attack on the Boers at Rietfontein on the road to Elandslaagte, with the purpose of distracting them from any pursuit of Ewell. During the course of this operation, the commanding officer of the Gloucesters, Lieutenant Colonel Wilford, precipitately led one of his companies in a charge against the Boer position, suffering substantial casualties and losing his own life. British killed, wounded and missing were 114, Gloucesters amounting to 63 of these, and the Boer casualties around 35. At noon on 26 October 1899, Ewell's force reached Ladysmith in a state of exhaustion. With the withdrawal from Dundee, Ladysmith became the most advanced British position. Large quantities of supplies were being brought up by train from Durban, Natal's port, and stored around the town. A range of hills ringed the town on the north side, making it a difficult place to defend against the Boers converging on the hills from north and west. General Buller, on his way to Natal to take overall command of British forces in the colony, urged that White should withdraw the British forces south and take up positions on the Tugela River. This proposal was initially strenuously opposed by Healy Hutchinson, the British governor of Natal, who resisted any abandonment of British territory. Between 26th and 29th October 1899, Joubert's Transvaal Boers reached the range of hills to the north of Ladysmith and began to prepare for their attack on the town. The central Boer position was on Pepworth Hill, around 4 miles north of Ladysmith. The Boers advancing from the Orange Free State threatened Ladysmith from the west, but were still some distance from the town. The Boers brought up a number of their newly acquired European guns and positioned them on Pepworth Hill. It is not clear what guns the Boers deployed during this battle, but it would seem that their artillery included one, possibly two, of the large Creusot heavy siege guns known as Long Toms, together with quick-firing field guns bought from Schneider Cannet and Krupp, and a light automatic gun built by Vickers Maxim, given the nickname of a pom-pom. Other pieces were brought up during the battle. The larger Boer guns far outranged the 15-pounders of the Royal Field Artillery batteries in White's army. On the other hand, the Boers lacked trained gunners and relied upon high-explosive shells rather than the shrapnel used almost exclusively by the British Royal Field Artillery. It was the experience of the war that high-explosive shells were largely ineffective and that casualties were inflicted with airburst shrapnel. While at times frightening to the inexperienced British soldiers, and particularly to the civilian inhabitants of Ladysmith, the Boer guns did little damage. The Boers dug entrenchments on Pepworth Hill and occupied its lower extension to the east, Long Hill. The whole Boer position extended for a considerable distance along the semicircle of hills some 4 miles to the north of Ladysmith. The British force in Ladysmith was substantially outnumbered, and a council of caution would have caused White to entrench and hold off the Boers until the army corps that was being shipped by sea from Britain to Durban arrived and came to his assistance. For whatever motive, White determined to attack the Boer forces gathering in front of him, which he seriously underestimated. General White resolved to attack the Boer positions using much the same tactics that had been used at Talana and Elandslaagte, an artillery bombardment followed by a frontal and a flanking infantry attack. On 29th October 1899, a newly arrived balloon from England, crewed by the Royal Engineers, was sent up, to the amazement of the inhabitants of Ladysmith, to observe the Boer dispositions. The Orange Free State Boers were still to the west of Ladysmith, although it was feared that they would soon join their Transvaal brothers, creating an army significantly stronger than White's force in Ladysmith. White's plan was based on the assumption that Pepworth Hill and Long Hill were the Boers' main position, and that they would remain there during the course of any attack the British might make. White appears to have considered he would be able to defeat the Boers in much the same way that his subordinates had beaten them at Talana Hill and Elandslaagte. The difference now was that the Boers were present in substantially greater strength than was available to White, and were commanded by an effective and resourceful general in Erasmus.